So this is the project. We have this guy, which is just like a little arpeggiator thing, and then some birds in forest, down 50 dB. So that is what it is. And then there is one more atmosphere layer as well, tape echo spring reverb noise, which is just another like noisy layer. I think it's really helpful to have like these kinds of, I mean, if you're not working with equipment that already does these kind of noise things, then I think it's really helpful to add some of this stuff in, especially in intros and stuff, where if you just have like a piano or like a keyboard playing, it will sound a little bit claustrophobic if it's just like a plugin playing on top of like digital silence. So I think it's really helpful to have like, yeah, all kinds of like little Foley, like the birds here, and little noise. And also, yeah, this like wobbly arpeggiator guy, which also has RC20 on it, which helps it go wobble. Yeah, I think there's something about the human ear that makes you like these little imperfections. I don't know what it is, but like whenever something is like too static for too long time, then it will start to get boring. This synth lead guy, another synth lead guy, or like, yeah. So they kind of like have this little chord thing going. Like when layering stuff, you shouldn't necessarily always try to have like all the parts play a similar MIDI. I think it's good practice to like have different layers playing different things. I think that will help you like come up with richer textures and stuff. So this on top of the chords will sound like this. So just this little belly thing. I have a little bit of just some EQ and stuff. And then the keys that already were in there, then bass from Logic's Retro Synth, the analog funk preset. Some Juno chords from the TAL Juno, which is amazing. Then we have this wobbly arp, which I think is a pretty important element, even though you can't really hear it. Or you can hear it, but like it's kind of subtle. It sort of like gives the track a sense of movement. So that's just the Serum preset. It looks like it's a Fabian Mazur preset. Yeah, Vital Serum presets by Fabian Mazur, and then it's going through some RC20 and Valhalla Delight. Then I have this guy, which is baritone guitar, I think. Just doubling the bass. It's very subtle in the mix, but I just wanted to have something doubling the bass where it just gets a little bit wider without actually making the low end wider. All right, so there's the bass with the baritone guitar. It's kind of subtle, but I think it's nice to add in some of more human elements in a track like this. Any advice on drums? Oliver sample pack. Done. And also, I don't know, like to me it's about finding some really solid layer sounds to start with, like find like a really clean kick drum and a really clean snare drum, and then you can like go crazy on top of them. But if you don't have a solid bass to build on, then you're wasting your time. Pretty basic stuff, actually. So this is the kick drum. It's from an older remix I did. Yeah, I was probably just stuck when I was starting this remix and didn't know what to do, and I thought might as well just drag in some drums from older tracks and see what's what. So yeah, this is from the remix I did for Saint Say called Breathe. And also it looks like the snare is from that one as well. Yeah, I think it's good practice to save all your, like when you're done with the jack, export all the drums as waves. Because then, like, if you're getting stuck, then you have at least like a bank of things that you know worked. The snare is just this. Then clap from the Jingy pack again. Just a simple, like a very tight, yeah, it says old school and it sounds like that as well. It's actually a good point to talk about layering as well. So I have a bunch of drum layers and stuff, but the actual sounds themselves are pretty simple and solid. I think that's a good approach, to have like a simple and solid base for the layers, and then like you can go crazy on the actual layers themselves. And then there's this loop, which is another sort of atmospheric loop, which I think, like, once again, like having stuff like this in the background, I think helps a lot in tying, like basically like making the drums feel more like a drum set instead of like just a collection of samples. Then there's just some random percussion stuff, open hats, very basic stuff. And that's everything for the drums. Then the drum bus. Okay, so just the UAD Ampex tape machine. It's not doing a ton. Like you can see here, the views are not like smashing hard, but I still like it. It also adds a little bit of noise. I don't know if you can hear that. But yeah, once again, just like piling on these little things that sort of like make it sound more like a record. Where did you learn how to play and improvise funky jazz chords on piano? Can you advise for beginners to start improvising, create these chord progressions and melodies? Yeah, I didn't really have like any formal education on the keys per se, so I'm probably not the best person to ask. But I think like just learning your favorite songs, basically, I think is the best way. Just sort of like figuring out what the chords do. For me, a big influence has been Prince as far as those harmonies go. So just learning those section by section. And you don't even need to like necessarily learn to play them on the keys first. You can just like sort of maybe draw out the MIDI, or if you know how to do musical notation, like write them out. But yeah, I think that's the best way to like learn from songs that you like, and that's how you start to find your own voice. Do you have musical education? Yeah, I do. 7, and then like I took some music theory classes and stuff. But yeah, a little bit, but I don't think any of that is necessary for starting to produce. So there's my guitar chain right now. It's the Fender, the UAD Fender Deluxe amplifier into Pultec, just boosting all the way at AK, which kind of is a bit too much, but I like it. And then there's a Distressor, which does quite a bit actually. So let's have a listen to the sample first, and then after that, the main thing. All right, so this is what I did at the very start. And then this is where we ended up. Maybe it's just like I take these chords and make like a cool sample out of them, and just make like a quick sampler. Ideally, some of these could be like shorter as well. So, ticka. Let's try something with the actual. I don't know, it still feels a little bit boring. All right, I want some nice little arpeggio background things. Yeah, maybe that's more like a. How do you go about leveling stuff? Do you generally have go by ear? Or do you have any rules to go by? Like how should a vocal be compared to the instruments? No rules, just by ear, and having a monitoring setup that you can trust is a must. Because for me, it goes like I feel like the vocal is too low. I'll do something about the like either turn it up or like move the EQ so that the vocal comes up. And all of those decisions should be made by ear and by feel. And if you have a monitoring setup that like it tells you to turn up the vocal, and then you listen to the song in the car and the vocal is actually way too loud, like that's a monitoring setup that you can't trust. For some reason, there's multiple reasons why that could be the case, but you have to find a setup where like decisions you make by feel translate into the real world. And for me, that's my barefoot and a good room with good acoustics. Well, right now I'm like in a temporary space that doesn't have like amazing acoustics, but still I have quite a lot of treatment here. But yeah, that's like you have to be able to operate by feel with these things. And if you can't, then it's a lost battle in my opinion, and like no amount of rules can help. But of course, like at the start, it's tough. And that's where, in my opinion, like references are huge. It's just like helps so much when you listen to something else, and then you can compare. But after you've done the referencing for a while, especially with like one single setup and the room that you're starting to know, then after a while you just hopefully you'll start to like have a feeling for those things. By the way, I've been really into this Neutron thing lately. Instead of like boosting with an EQ, I'll just use this. Like it's a multiband exciter. I'll just find the frequency area that I want to bring up and I'll use this instead. This is just like because it's like a multiband exciter thing, so it's a nice way of like actually adding harmonic content as well, instead of just boosting the frequencies, because it like generates new harmonics too. Like here, actually, I think I actually did it a bunch already. Yeah, I have the Neutron on almost all the channels, so this might not be the best example, but let's have a look. Yeah, actually, this is a great example. Like, listen. When I take it off, the vocal just disappears. That's with the exciter. Let me actually boost it a little bit more. Yeah, it just like disappears. And if you look at the levels here, it is boosting the level a little bit, but even if you compensate for the level boost, it's still way more like audible, and like you can tell what the vocal is actually doing. So even if you compensate for the volume difference, which most of the time I don't bother doing that, because I know sort of like I know what it's doing. But yeah, it's a great tool of like, because if you did this with an EQ, like it would only like, I don't know, like it wouldn't add any like new information. This way you're actually getting like all these harmonics that didn't exist before.
It's a combination of everything. For me, it's mostly about like making sure the bass has like the right kind of low end, which it didn't, but now it sort of has that, and the drums having enough like punch, so that like you have a really strong sense of like the basically, yeah, the kick on the snare. And I think like combining that, like everything is sort of tight, but then you have like this drum loop and this kick, where there is a little bit of like room in there. I think that's a really cool sound when you can combine sort of like the tightness of that with the like the roominess of some of the drums. Do you pay much attention to crest factor, LUFS, etc. when you're producing, like preparing the mix to be as loud as possible for the master? I don't really pay attention to the numbers themselves. Of course, like I do look at the LUFS meter here from time to time. But mostly for me, it's like if I can't get the mix to feel good at around 7 to 6 LUFS, which is already crazy loud, but like there's my thinking. If I can't get the mix to feel loud, like nice and clean and loud at those sort of figures, then there's probably something wrong with the mix. Either there's too much bass, like stealing all the headroom, or maybe there's like some kind of low mid build up or something like that. And I do think about loudness all the time. It's not so much about like being super loud. It's more about like nice and balanced mixes usually sound good when played loud. And yeah, if I can't, like if there's something preventing me from like having a loud mix, then there's probably something wrong with the mix. Of course, like because yeah, with my kind of sound, like it's important that the drums hit hard and there's a lot of bass and everything is sort of like nice and compact. So yeah, I do think about it a lot. But I also try not to get too bogged down about it, like especially while I'm making the music. Like I'm always like it's always in the back of my head, but I'm not like actively looking at places to like boost another like additional dB or something like that. But yeah, I do clip, like add clipping with like a soft clipper, and like I do, yeah, like often I'll have like soft clippers at the end of the chains to make sure that like my peaks are controlled. So by the time it hits the master bus, like everything is sort of like already dialed in, and I don't need to do like a ton of heavy lifting here.
Thank you everyone for tuning in, and once again, it's incredible that people from like all around the world are gathering around my computer screen to look over my shoulder and seeing what goes on here.